like to tell you a story, and it's a story that begins in 1990. Now, I just started my PhD, or DPhil as they call it at Oxford, at the Department of Experimental Psychology at Oxford. And for the first time, I was able to meet people who shared some particular interests of mine. Now, for many years, I've been interested in consciousness, the nature of reality, spirituality, mysticism. I've read lots and lots of literature, basically just on my own bat, really. But I did a minor in religious studies from undergraduate. So I was interested in the nature of reality, in a sense, and our experience of reality. But I lived in Newcastle, and so really, I never could find anyone who was interested in talking about these things. But at Oxford, I started to come to the orbit of some people who were interested in the nature of reality, and they put me in touch with a group in Hampstead. And so, thereafter, I went to London every Wednesday afternoon on the bus, and then I got the tube in rush hour to Hampstead, and then we'd spend the evening talking about the nature of reality, consciousness, and, in a sense, the human experience. And we studied principally the works of a man called George Gurdjieff. Now, Gurdjieff died in 1947, and he's a Russian mystic, but he had an interesting take on things. He basically said that everything that we say, think, and do is basically run on automatic pilot. And so everything I say, everything I think, and everything that I do is already, in a sense, predetermined by automatic pilot. Now, as a neuroscientist, that's fascinating because he's completely correct. Everything that I say, think, and do is pre-packaged and pre-programmed in my brain, but behind the bit of me that I call consciousness. Okay, so in a sense, it's in the unconscious mind, in unconscious brain, but basically, it's just in your brain, and you're not aware of it. So, here's the first interesting point: everything that you experience is created for you. And then the bit of you that you think of as you experiences it and takes ownership of it. So you might say, I told a good joke. But actually, your brain told a good joke, you took ownership over it. Okay. So I find that quite fascinating because it suggests that like we're all pre-programmed and pre-planned. Well, but then you might say, well, can I change? Can I ever change? Well, of course you can change. Because you can learn, right? So you learn stuff all the time. So how is it that everything's pre-programmed and pre-planned, and yet you can learn? You can change that, in a sense, that programming. Let me come back to that in a minute. Now, people say to me, I've been anxious for all my life. I've been depressed for 50 years. You know, I've had panic attacks for 30 years, but I've always been stressed. Can I change? And I say, well, can you learn? Right? And they say, well, of course I can learn. Okay, well, if you can learn, you can change. If you wanted to learn Spanish, well, let me teach you a word of Spanish. Cambio. Cambio means change in Spanish. Now, if you put a little bit of effort into it, you could remember that word. You could remember the word change in Spanish, cambio, okay? Now, if tomorrow I taught you another word, I don't know, calle, street, pregunta, question. Let's say pregunta, question, right? So, tomorrow you'd know two words. You'd know cambio for change and pregunta for question. And if you continue doing that for a year, you'd know 365 words in Spanish, which actually would give you 50% of the common usage words. And so without really kind of putting much effort into it, you'd be able to get by in Spanish. Okay. You can learn. But the question is this. If you can learn, why is it that you have been depressed for however many years? Why is it that you've been anxious for however many years? Why is it that you have panic for however many years? You can learn, so why does your experience not change? Yeah, okay, you can learn, but are you learning anything different to change your experience? So look, if you're depressed today, you practiced being depressed yesterday, and you didn't do anything to change your experience today. Today, if you do nothing to change your experience, tomorrow will be more or less the same, right? But you can learn. But the question is, will you learn? And will you learn something that's useful to you? So, here's the thing, right? If you do something today that is useful to challenge depression or anxiety, tomorrow you'll have a slightly different experience. And if tomorrow you do something different, the next day you'll have a slightly different experience. and so on and so forth, until eventually you have eradicated depression and anxiety from your life. Now, in fairness, if you've been anxious all of your life, it takes a little while, but it's not that difficult. And I have to say, it's a heck of a lot easier than learning a language. If you put as much effort into learning 365, well, if you learn 365 words at one word a day, I would have thought half of that effort would be sufficient to change your experience, so that you could go, do you know what? I recognize my experience is different from what it was 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Okay. So, we have established that you can learn. We have established that learning is not the problem. What is the problem is what to learn to change your experience. And I guess the second real important question is, will you learn anything today that will change your experience? Now, most of you won't, because that's the nature of these things. And most people will not take action to change their internal experience. And the reason for that is because we're probably, and I've done the same myself, right? We're devoted to magic, quick fixes, superstitious behaviors, and all sorts of other kinds of stuff. And in fairness, you probably do loads of stuff that's really unhelpful, like avoidance and, secretiveness and not thinking about stuff, all that kind of thing. That's all really unhelpful, So there's a whole lot of processes that go on that make it difficult to learn something different. But some people will be motivated to change their experience. Now, taking you back to the original story, I spent about 4 years working with this group, and then when I finished my PhD I went to do a postdoc in New York, and I joined up with another group. So I spent about 4 years devoting my time to realizing that reality is fluid and that we can have control over our reality. We don't unless we take control of our reality. Our reality is fluid. We are the ones that create our reality to a very large extent. We don't know that we do that, and that's the case. That's why we have to learn, right? So if you have depression or anxiety, you are creating this experience. You created it yesterday, you'll create it today, you'll create it tomorrow. If you want to have a different experience, we engage that bit of your brain that's conscious, and we learn something today, and we learn something tomorrow, and we learn something the next day, and that changes the trajectory of our problems. And in principle, that's what you do in therapy, right? You learn stuff from your therapist teaches you tools, and you learn stuff. Now, from my experience working with that Gurdjieff group, and in experimenting with the fluid nature of reality, I came up with a unique set of tools, creative, innovative, and engaging, that you can use to change your reality. Now, as I said, most of you won't. That's fine. For those of you who are interested in changing your reality, you will find a name and email link somewhere near this video, and it will give you an opportunity to tap into the tools of self-help CBT. Now, you'll get some free trainings that will kind of help you to understand that you can have quite a substantial amount of control over the reality that you experience. Now, this is not your experience, right? You do not necessarily believe what I've said to you. It's as far as you're concerned, it might just be me talking, right? I'm trying to sell you something. It's whatever. Okay. Nevertheless, you can learn. If you believe you cannot learn anything, if you cannot learn a word of Spanish, if you cannot learn anything, then this is not going to be any use to you, right? But if you acknowledge that you can learn, therefore, if you learn something different today, your tomorrow will be a little bit different. And even if it's just remembering the word cambio, tomorrow you will know a word of Spanish that you did not know today. Now, if you put your name and email in, and if you join this little training that I'm doing, your tomorrow will be different, because you'll have taken action today, and you'll get another video tomorrow, and that video will give you some more information about the nature of the fluidity of reality. So you have a choice. You can learn, but that's not the question, right? The question is, will you learn? Will you take the opportunity to learn, or will you not? And if you don't, of course, then you can say, well, I've been depressed all my life. Okay. Or you could say, well, I've been depressed all my life, but you know what? I'm on a different journey. I'm doing something about it. I'm taking control of my destiny. I'm changing my future. Okay, good for you. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen. I'm Dr. David Purvis. Your name and your email, you'll find a link somewhere near this video, and that's your opportunity.